Even when you manifest something big, keep learning energetics, keep coming back to the practice, because that's what's going to put one foot in front of the other to connect you with everything your soul's been asking for. And that's what's going to help you start to navigate and get out of that rut. From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. Part of our manifestation process entails expanding past your limiting subconscious beliefs. Therefore, by tuning into this podcast with interviews from experts, thought leaders, spiritual teachers, scientists, and those with neural manifestation success stories, you're starting the process of expanding your subconscious in order to see to believe that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, the process begins. Welcome back to another Explained episode, which has quickly become your favorite segment of the entire podcast, Expanded. In Explained, Dr. Tara Swart joins my co-host Jessica Gill and I in deep diving on specific themes within manifestation, which all of you love because it's where we bridge our process of manifestation with neuroscience and psychology and the deep science that anchors it all together. Back in July, Dr. Tara Swart joined us as our psychology and neuroscience advisor. And why we handpicked her, besides the fact that she's so unbelievably marvelous, she has a PhD in neuroscience and a former medical career as a psychiatrist of 7 years. She's also a senior lecturer and on faculty at MIT, no big deal, and senior lecturer at King's College. She's currently working on research projects on plasticity and epigenetics. She has Google Talks, LinkedIn, Facebook, and 2 TED Talks. She's also the author of 3 books, her latest being The Source. So let's get into another Explained episode where Dr. Tara and I break down the energetics and science of manifestation, offering a roundtable perspective on the deep intricacies and connection. Here goes.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Explained. Jessica here with Lacy Phillips and Dr. Tara. Today's theme is one we get questions on a lot. The difference and what it feels like to be in a magic dark, a rut, and a rock bottom. So I'm going to kick us off with a quote. You'll be stuck in a rut for as long as you decide. Stop ignoring what you want and settling for less than you deserve. So all of these 3 periods in manifestation are very distinct. They often feel like nothing's really happening, or you're in a low point or a low point, and all of them help to create a lot of magnetism on the other side of these periods, but they need to be navigated differently because different energetics are coming up. So just kind of a brief overview. The magic dark is the in-between uncomfortable period. You've been tested and you've been unblocking, you've been expanding, but your manifestations haven't really come through yet. It's kind of like the well has dried up. Whereas the rut is something that you feel like you've been in this endless cycle for 4+ months. You're kind of trekking through mud. You don't really have clarity. Your motivation's lacking. And you're just kind of unclear. You're meandering through life. That's sort of the feeling of the rut. And then the rock bottom is sort of when the universe earthquakes you. It kind of like pulls the rug out from underneath of you, and all of your security and stability is like gone and you're kind of questioning what's going to happen next. Usually it comes around getting fired or leaving a job or a breakup, some sort of big life moment. So we're going to go into each of these in depth. If you're still confused, don't worry. You'll have clarity by the end of the episode. But I wanted to start off with you, Lacy. How did you discover these terms and these periods in energetic through manifestation? What did you see start coming up and what were the patterns that were surrounding them?
Yeah. So for anybody too who hasn't ever done the pathway, where this terminology lives, so the rut is inside of how to manifest. And so in how to manifest, it's the step-by-step process that we teach in manifestation. And one of them that became so clear to me just as Tess had, something I had never learned before in prior manifestation content that I kind of call spiritual bypass rhetoric. I had really noticed that when I would start to step into my self-worth, I would be tested, especially if my self-worth was very low. The test would be regular and they would get more and more difficult as I passed them. And so for a refresher on tests, we have a whole episode on that we can link below so you understand that terminology. Then something I realized was when I was very close to my manifestation, especially if my self-worth had been low prior to. So an example of this could have been when I was waitressing at the Laugh Factory on Sunset. Very toxic environment, was treated very poorly, started to make less and less money than the already low money I was already making. And basically the universe was pushing me out of my comfort, out of my nest. And we can get into that later as an earthquake. However, that was an example of my self-worth being very low because I stayed. I didn't know I could get better. I think a lot of us can go through that where we feel if we haven't done any work on where we are currently, we can become very complacent out of fear. And so when I did end up having an earthquake moment, again, we'll talk about that later, and I started to look for other experiences for jobs, I would get tested all the time. You know, the next one I remember was waitressing at this other place that seemed a little flashier and more interesting, but I could tell it was the same toxic environment. Another thing was that I would make less money, so that's how the tests sort of roll in. And I could recognize it at that point because I understood this manifestation practice. So I started passing those tests and I was like, no, even though I was broke, I didn't have a lot in savings. I was like, I'm doing the work to step into my self-worth subconsciously. I'm actively passing these tests. And then all of the sudden, there's a moment that came where it feels like there's crickets. And so this tends to come when savings is running out. In dating, it feels like the person is almost the perfect fit, but they're not. Or it could even be to the point now where you were having so many tests in dating and now nobody's showing up and you're feeling all of those fears of insecurity coming up again, or maybe I should have settled for that last person. What you're being tested on here is a space called the magic dark. And so what's being tested is, are you truly not going to settle for what you used to settle for in the past? So the lower your self-worth was in your last opportunity, and this is applicable for everything in life. It can be applicable for finances, for manifesting a house, for personal growth. Basically, if your self-worth was very low in your prior situation, you are for sure going to receive a magic dark period. And so the true energetic that the universe is asking is, do you 100% trust me? And are you 100% not going to go backwards to where you used to be? Have you truly grown your self-worth to match the thing you're calling in? Because that's how this work works. Your self-worth has to align with the self-worth of what you're calling in, what's orbiting you. So that's the magic dark. I just want people to be very familiar with that because people get it confused often with a rock bottom or the rut, which we'll talk about now. And it's not, just as Jessica said, you've actually gone through how to manifest, you're following the formula, you've been passing all of your tests, and now it's like, oh shit, nothing's happening and my savings is about to run out. Or if it's an apartment I'm calling in, all of a sudden I've said no to all of these places that aren't my list. I passed those tests and now I'm hearing nothing and I have to be out of this place in a week. That's what it feels like. It feels like when the water recedes and you don't think it's going to come back in. Or people will often say the darkest before the dawn. And it's that last final trust muscle moment, the universe, the big, big test. So I figured that out just because it kept happening, because I think for anybody who tends to find a new process in a niche, it's because they've gone through the experiences and they figured out what helped them. And so reading energetics and following, this manifestation formula, it tended to happen to me a lot because my self-worth was low pretty much all around in my life. So I was figuring it out with money, at the same time with career, as dating, apartments, kind of everything. So that's how I figured that out. People who have done this work definitely go, yep, I've experienced that before, the magic dark, and nobody had ever talked about it. So then now, moving over to the rut and rock bottom, I really discovered this through the energetics of a rock bottom that I was experiencing a few years ago, and that they vary. And so we have this, it's a workshop called Up Level. And inside of Up Level, there are 3 workshops inside of it. This is in the pathway. One of them's rut, one of them's rock bottom, and then the other one's called next level. So the next level is when the person's actually already generating a lot of magnetism and they're ready to go to the next level. So the rock bottom is often confused with the rut. People will say, I'm doing this work and I'm in a magic dark. Nothing's coming through. It's the darkest before the dawn. However, they haven't really done how to manifest. They're not really receiving tests. They haven't been doing the unblocking. So no, they're not in a magic dark at all, because the magic dark is actually very close to your manifestation. And again, you've passed a lot of tests. You're very close to it. The rut is when you're off your authentic path. So you're doing something that society, programming from, again, it could be media, parental, community, just any pressure, that you're off the path that isn't authentic to you or your soul's purpose. And this is applicable, again, in every aspect of life. It's not just career. It can be the way you're showing up in a group of friends that don't even serve you. It can be in relationship, you're continuing to date or continuing to be in a marriage or a relationship that is completely different than what your soul has grown into and needs and wants. So a rut, just like Jessica said, is something you are continuously in for months at a time, and you feel like you're not having any momentum in your life. The wheels just feel like they're spinning in the mud, and you certainly can't confuse this again with a magic dark, because you don't have momentum forward. The universe is literally saying, hello, come back to your true authentic self. So we created that workshop to really give you the energetics of how to navigate that. And then my favorite of all, which is the most painful that exists, but I've actually learned to love rock bottoms. Just as Jessica explained, a rock bottom is when you've been consciously or unconsciously calling in a manifestation and it's very close to you, but you haven't grown your self-worth quick enough to connect with it. However, it's so close to you, it's ready to come in, that the universe literally slaps you or earthquakes you off whatever trajectory you're on at this very moment, which sounds very scary, but it's actually really, really beautiful and special, because it's like, I need you to grow your self-worth so quickly right now to connect with this thing, because it's about to come through for you. So it's a little bit of a super speed manifestation. And again, just as Jessica said, this can be getting fired. It can be getting a DUI. I mean, I'm just trying to think of the many different versions I've heard of this. It can be cancel culture, getting called out. It can be a divorce out of nowhere, totally unseen. So just know those huge earthquaking moments, they're considered a rock bottom. However, it's because you're actually up leveling so quickly that what you've been calling in is right there next to you. And it's like, I need you to do the quick energetic things you need to do to connect with me, which is what that whole workshop is created and based on, giving you those tools and energetics to meet it.
Oof, I'm like thinking back on all the times I've gone through these 3, and it's kind of a wild ride. I almost was more fearful, I think, in the magic dark, because it was like that quiet stillness, and I had been doing so much unblocking, whereas the rock bottom, it was like, all right, we got work to do. Like there's a lot to move on the other side. But the magic dark was like, for a perfectionist and a control freak like myself, I was like, what do I do now? How do I move? And just dropping into that deservingness was so challenging, but also effective.
Yeah, and I think everybody experiences these a little differently. And one thing I do want to point out, we've talked about this on multiple episodes, and we can certainly go into the science of this again, but all of these require your trust muscle to become strong. So trust muscle is something we talk about in How to Manifest, the workshop. We talk about it, in the brand a lot. Every time you manifest something, you build your muscle. It's just like working out. When you first start this process, you're like, I don't really have any evidence based on the fact that this will work. So doing things like jumping off cliffs or passing tests are very hard because you're like, wait, I'm just saying no to something that could be really great, that probably really strongly resembles a toxic pattern in the past. And I'm just going to say no to it. However, each time you manifest something small to big, you build a trust muscle. And so each of these periods, a magic dark, rut, and rock bottom, all require strengthening your trust muscle to really, really blindly navigate it through the energetics we're telling you to. And I do promise on the other side is a manifestation. So that's one thing that I just want to say. And I think every one of us, based on our own programming that we've grown up with, pain, shame, abandonment, relationship to anything, we're going to experience these 3 periods differently, but all of us are being called upon to build our trust muscle. And we can talk about that, Dr. Tara, because you always cover that so well, the science of past evidence that helps you build that helps you go in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to say that, I resonated with what both of you said about the magic dark. And I think even where you, Lacy, said I was in the magic dark in every aspect of my life, I feel like that's part of perhaps being in your 20s, because I'm pretty sure I've been there too. And that phrase, the darkest hour is before dawn, I think is actually correct in terms of physics, but it's also about perspective. Once you are at that lowest point and you turn the corner, you can look back and see that that was the darkest hour. But when you're in it, you can't. And magic dark is really frustrating until you understand the mechanism of neural manifestation, which is that you're literally physically building new pathways in your brain. You are getting neurons to connect through synaptic connection. You may even be growing new neurons through neurogenesis, and then you're creating these new pathways and they may become myelinated. So that's physically like, if you recovered from surgery, you wouldn't blame yourself for your wound not healing overnight. You understand that it takes some time. It's like how a scab forms. So, but the problem is that whilst you're doing all that hard work, and it's actually quite tiring, it can even make you feel hungrier, you are not seeing any results in real life. So it feels like there's a lot of effort going in, but no reward coming out. But the way that it works is there's a tipping point where you have built up a critical mass of neurons and your new way of behaving, believing becomes the default. And then that's when suddenly the manifestation falls into place. So understanding the science of that has really helped me. The rut piece, I feel, is very related to low self-worth. So I think psychologically it's not anything more than that. I loved what Jessica said about you'll stay in a rut for as long as you let yourself. It has to be about sort of deciding that you deserve more than that. And then the rock bottom is something I feel really passionate about, because absolutely it can be all of those examples that you said, like a divorce, losing your job, an accident. But I love the idea of thinking that it's possible that you don't have to go through some sort of life crisis. I mean, we're probably all going to go through something, but if people started the work, in their 20s or 30s, then it may be that you don't have to go through a big crisis like that to really sort of realize that you have to up level so quickly. But I have a question for you, Lacy, because my astrologer says that happens when the planets are aligned in a certain way and you haven't been going down the path that you're supposed to. So I just wondered if you had any views on that.
It's so interesting because I bounce off things with my astrologer, Danny Beinstein, all of the time. And, I know a lot of people in this brand have worked with her a lot. And it's fascinating how their life experiences, even through the work, match up with what's happening in their chart. It's never off. So I guess what I'm saying is the tools are still super applicable, even when you're going through these life experiences. So the way I like to look at it is I believe everything's obviously connected. And so our ascension is happening at the perfect right time that we're consciously even aware that something's possible, which happens to align so perfectly with our astrology, which I believe happens to connect to when we find a certain tool or the work, or when we finally resonate with a certain DI that maybe never resonated before, but all of a sudden it's just the medicine we need because we're upgrading, which is aligning with our chart. So a good example of that was Lila, who used to work with us. She would be going through, I feel like Lila's always in a magic dark, or right now she'd probably say she's in a little bit of a growth rut period. And it's so interesting that it would line up with exactly the reading that she would get from Danny Beinstein, and the tools still worked and were applicable. So I believe that it's all just super, super connected, and that we find the right tools at the right point at which we're consciously even ready to address something when we're going through it.
Let's go through and share some examples just so we can give people some tangible explanations and what it felt like for each of us. Because like you said, Lacy, it does feel differently depending upon what your sort of core wounds or blocks or whatever may be. Let's actually start off with the rock bottom, because often that comes... I don't know if it necessarily, like it can come back again, but I feel like my first conscious awareness of knowing all of these three, I hit rock bottom, and then later on moved into rut, and then later on moved into a magic dark. Everyone's different, but often rock bottom is kind of like the first awakening moment, or people find a new way of learning about themselves through a rock bottom. But yeah, so why don't you guys kick us off? What is a pivotal rock bottom moment that you can recall?
Funnily enough, as Jessica was saying, I went through it in this order. People are different. I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I went through it in that order too. So maybe there's something to that, but we'll see what Lacy says. So I would say that, my biggest, maybe not my first, but my biggest rock bottom was getting divorced after being with my first husband for 11 years. And I don't know whether they're connected or not. They probably are. But obviously I decided to change career at the same time. So that's when I stopped being a doctor and started training as a coach. And I also was living abroad with him. So I moved back to England and didn't really have a proper place to live. So definitely a rock bottom. And I guess that's why I'm quite passionate about saying, I wouldn't wish other people to have to go through that to kind of get the understanding that I got out of that. And I would say, yes, that nicely kind of segued into a rut, which was, I think, understandable. I don't, beat myself up about it at all, but my self-worth was not great at that time. I'd gone from being married to single, gone from being a senior doctor to starting again at the bottom of the pile of a career. And, in moving countries, I'd gone from like living in a home with someone to just sort of having to stay with my parents or my friend's parents for a while. So it was pretty bad in every department. And, money was a concern because I'd gone from having a regular salary to, I did have an interim job, but at some point I was going to have to start up my business. So I think the magic dark came when, sort of fast forward a few months and, we definitely separated, getting divorced. I was living alone. I was still depending on him financially for the rent. And it was September. And I remember I had 3 coaching clients and we all start off small. So I wasn't earning a lot of money from them. And they were due to finish by the end of the year. And it suddenly hit me that I was not going to get a doctor's paycheck when these people completed their program. And I didn't really see how I could actually guarantee getting any new clients. And so I made a decision then that I think, it's very related to what we were talking about in the previous episode with self-worth and self-respect and things, which is that there's a baseline threshold that you can't go below. And I guess that served me well at the time because I decided, okay, this is how much money I need to live. And I can reasonably have this many clients at any one time. So I'm going to have to triple my fees because otherwise I actually won't be able to eat or pay my rent or my bills. So it wasn't because I think I'm so great and I've got massive self-worth. It was kind of like, this is what I need to do. But I did have that belief that I could do it. So I tripled my fees. And, the crazy thing is that when you charge higher, more senior people think you're an appropriate coach for them. So I suddenly got my first CFO and CEO clients. And then I thought, okay, this is not a coincidence. It's because when you charge at a certain level, people feel like you must be worth it. Luckily, having been a doctor and trained as a coach, I could deliver against that promise. And then by 1 year later, but well before that, but, absolutely by a year after that point of being in the hour of the magic dark, I actually put my prices down slightly again because I was like, well, I'm making enough, more than enough, that I don't need to charge each person that, and I could perhaps see more clients. So it's an interesting thing, I think, looking back on it, that obviously I had that baseline that helped me to make a brave decision, and it really paid off. And, I understand that if my self-worth had been much lower than that, I probably couldn't have done that. But I certainly do remember that story now when I feel like I'm in that darkest hour.
Ooh, and one question I want to ask, because what I loved about your rock bottom is everything fell away, right? Like you shed everything that was not aligning with you, all of your comforts and safety. Are you comfortable sharing what the precipice for the divorce was? Like, did it come abruptly out of nowhere? Was it just one day you woke up and you're like, I can't do this anymore? I like people to understand how it feels when a rock bottom hits.
Yeah. And again, it's easier to look back on it and explain it, because it does feel like there was a point where a conversation was had between us and we couldn't carry on. But that was after 7 years of marriage. So the 11 years was together. But I distinctly remember, and it was a fleeting thought. So it's interesting that I remember it because it must have been associated with a lot of emotion. About 2 years earlier, thinking, I wonder if we're going to make it to our 5th anniversary. So I think there was a slow decline over 2 years. And then there was a series of things that happened that led to a sort of end it all conversation. But then actually in reality, I don't mind sharing this because it's not a secret, we didn't really properly separate for quite a while after that. And that perhaps was the biggest mistake that we both made, for our own self-worth, because it was such a gray area. It wasn't really good for anyone. And I'm, happy to say that we're very, very good friends now, but it definitely was, the uncomfortable part was stretched out for a lot longer than it had to be.
So it's like you went from a rut, then a rock bottom hit, which shed everything. And then you had to start to build yourself through self-worth, which put you in a magic dark that you stepped up for, even though it was really scary, charging the higher prices, which manifested. And then look at you now, like you're in the new marriage, the wonderful marriage, and your life is great and you're successful. But that's a really good example of being in a rut for too long. And again, if you are in a rut for too long, you're usually going to need something like when I was a waitress at the Laugh Factory that's going to push you out of your comfortable nest. It's just like a baby bird, which usually tends to be some sort of an earthquakey rock bottom that sheds all of the stuff that wasn't working. And that's when you go through and do the work to unblock, expand, and then the fun magic dark. And then you manifest. That's usually the trajectory when followed correctly. What about you, Jessica? I feel like I share mine all the time, and I'll certainly share something, but what would be one of your greatest ones you haven't shared before?
It's interesting. And mine kind of went similarly. So I think it's best if I go back a little bit. So I was in a college relationship that was like toxic, not aligned. My lifestyle at that point wasn't aligned. And I sort of up-leveled by removing myself from that relationship. And I was like, cool, I'm on the up and up. Everything's amazing. And very quickly jumped into a new relationship that was way healthier. And I was like, amazing. And it was almost like this false sense of growth because I didn't have that period to really integrate everything that I, had to learn from that past relationship. And so about a year in, we were having difficulties and the relationship wasn't really working out the way that I had anticipated because I still hadn't integrated so many layers of like self-worth. And I had just moved out to Los Angeles. We were long distance, and suddenly we were like, this is it. Like, this isn't working anymore. And it came so abruptly, especially because I had moved out here with the intention of like eventually both of us living together out here. And we had an apartment out here together. So I was a few months into LA, out of this relationship that I thought was just kind of still starting, had no car, now had to find a new apartment. The first gig that I had worked was ending, so I had no job. I had to like find a job in the term. So it was like everything stripped down. And it was like, you have nothing. You have to build from scratch right now and figure out your life because you thought it was going this way and it's going to go somewhere very different. And that was such a, oh my God, what's happening? All of the emotions coming up. But it was such a restart. It was like my spiritual awakening, so to speak, because that's when I started looking into self-actualization, more therapy things, finding like Eckhart Tolle and like all of these sort of gurus and really like finding my connection to myself again. Within the next year of that rock bottom happening, I manifested my now partner, who's amazing. And it was like the dream relationship I thought I had wanted previously. So it was like rock bottom, massive up level, you know, as I started stepping into my worth, clearing all of those things. Like I was so magnetic, called in a job, called in an amazing apartment. Now this new partner, like it filled in all of those gaps. And then after that up level kind of settled in for a bit, it went into a rut in my career sector and kind of like, what am I doing? Like, I don't know if I like the jobs that I'm taking. And I kept getting a lot of pings during that time to take certain actions or reach out to certain people. And I was kind of like dragging my feet. There was a lot of like fear, imposter syndrome, not wanting to switch career courses from like TV and film to wellness. And so it took me finally jumping off cliffs and realigning like, no, this is what I care about. This is what I love, for that rut to start moving again. And then the magic dark, I think happened, the biggest one I remember happened probably a year or so after that when I was calling in the TBM job, where I was up-leveling, I was unblocking, it seemed like everything was going in alignment. There was a period of massive tests, I think it was in June, where I had so many TV gigs reach out. They reached out higher salary price point. My boss from New York reached out and wanted me to like work with him in some capacity. Like there were so many random opportunities that were getting thrown my way. And I was like, no, no, no. And then it just went silent. And I was like, oh my God, like what's happening? Should I have taken those, opportunities just to like have a cushion of savings? Like how long is this going to last for? Why is nothing turning into anything? What do I do? And my nervous system was so fearful of the lack of, I guess, control of that period. And I remember being so, like, it was so easy for me to almost slip into that, like, fear spiral. But I had to do a DI every single morning. I think I was doing prosperity or trigger every single morning. I was like, I need to get into the state where I feel safe, check the reality. I have my savings. I'm okay. I have no reason to believe nothing will come through. Like just really, really laying in that feeling and continuing to unblock and continuing to really listen to pings. As things would pop up, I'd be like, oh, I should check this or reach out to this friend, and things started coming through. And then it wasn't until September. So the magic dark lasted, I think it started to get quiet around the end of July. And then it wasn't until September that the TBM job came through. And when it came through, it was like, boom.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, Now back to the episode. And that's a really good thing to share, that everybody's magic dark is going to be a different time frame. Yeah, I mean, I've experienced all of the above in every aspect of my life, because I think, again, I have to be the guinea pig. It's that whole 3-6 model in human design, the guinea pig to learn the energetics, even something as simple as acting, which I was so passionate about and worked my ass off in. And this is where the authentic code becomes really powerful. Having to go, is this my dream, or was it my mom's dream? Because she had the same dream. Am I living out her dream? Where I would be, reading sides for a pilot audition, but at a raw food restaurant, way more curious about what that was doing for my body. And it coincided, letting it go and starting this brand in its original form as a holistic blog at the same time that I was being told to leave my ex relationship, which I thought was going to be the thing with the French grandma that I love so much, that would be the grandma of my kids, so every aspect of my life, I've gone through these. I feel like I've given so many examples before, but yeah, I think the biggest takeaways here are each can lead to each other. None of them are the same situation. And the biggest thing to do is working on your trust muscle. So looking at past evidence of when you've manifested, your past patterning, what does that look like? My patterning is always very similar. When I'm upgrading, I can always see that, things are coming in threes, for instance, and I can recognize, oh, that contractor came, and that contractor came. And it's been the same shitty experience with all three of them. I'm up leveling right now. I'm being asked to upgrade. And this is really, really intense and painful and hard. Really looking at your past patterning is super helpful, knowing that your timeline is going to be totally different from somebody else's, but the patterns may be the same. And when I say patterns, I mean the actual formula of manifestation that we teach may be similar. I think that's a huge takeaway that's really important. And I think just being okay with having these tools to fall back on and anything else that's supporting you, like Eckhart was very supportive of you and very supportive for you, being okay and open to those other tools, but knowing that you have these tools as a grounding force when it feels like you are in a wave and you're being crashed around in the coral, it's like you're being thrust to the sand and you can't get out to breathe, that's okay. That's a part of the process. That's why you have a DI like you did, Jessica, daily to ground you. And that's why we created these very specific workshops, especially in up level with rock bottom and the rut. It literally gives you like step-by-step energetics of how to navigate these times, because they feel so unearthed and so unnatural and scary. And one of the biggest things I love to say when somebody is in an earthquaked moment of a rock bottom, the reactive portion is what creates the magnetism. How graceful you can be and not be as reactive as you've been in the past. We teach a whole day on that, like finding your grace expanders. And I'm thinking of a friend who's extremely passionate and reactive. And every time she's like that during a rock bottom, another one comes through, because it's like the reaction isn't coming from an integrated, healthy place. It's coming from old inner childhood wounds that are continuing to loop and continuing to attract similar experiences until she unblocks them so that she can connect with what she's calling in. So that's a really, really big piece. And then when it comes to the magic dark, the really, really big piece is, how much did I settle in the past? I'm not going to do it again. Like, it really comes down to finding the DIs that are going to help you address how much you were settling in the past experience that's similar to the one you're calling in that you're in a magic dark about, and how are you truly, truly, energetically not going to settle for that again. That's the thing to really look at. And then when it comes to the rut, what am I willing to let go of that I'm complacent in and comfortable in in order to really jump off the cliff to be in my authenticity. Like you, Tara, that was the coaching. It was the coaching. It was getting out of the relationship that wasn't serving you, that was literally just a rut. For me, my whole identity had been built on, and I was like a decently low level working actress. My whole identity had been built on that. And I had to have this moment where I was like, this is all ego. I have to leave this. It's all I've ever known. I didn't go to college. I haven't done anything else professionally, really, except for waitressing. I'm going to walk away from this and start something new. So it's like really, really looking at the ways you're still fulfilling some egoic programming that is not your true authenticity. May it be in relationship, in substance abuse. I saw that a DUI. There's just so many ways that you may not be living your truth of what your soul is authentically here for, relationally, in career, to yourself, to money, to material possessions. Really taking a look at what in your life is there through programming and ego. That's what's going to help you start to navigate and get out of that rut.
Lacy, I have to say that I have actually had an epiphany just discussing this with you, because I've obviously realized that my order is rut, rock bottom, magic dark. And I wasn't so aware that the relationship, apart from that little insight I had, I wasn't regularly aware that the relationship was going to end. But I was seriously thinking about leaving medicine for 2 years. So that was the exact same 2 years. And where you've said, it was an egoic thing. Obviously there is a lot of status that comes with being a doctor, but for me it was somebody else's dream. As well, you've just sort of said there was a similar thing with you as well. So I remember that at the rock bottom time, apart from what was going on personally, I literally woke up one day and thought, I never chose to do this. And if I'm so smart, because I had done a vocational degree, so I wasn't really mentally prepared to ever do anything else. And everyone was like, oh, you're so smart, you should do a PhD as well. I was like, if I'm so smart, I should be able to do whatever I want. But I've never even thought of what that was. So yeah, that was the rock bottom. I guess, unfortunately, the husband had to go with the job.
Well, what I love about that we say all of the time, and we can't stress it enough, is that love and money is always connected. And it goes to show they were on the exact same trajectory.
Yeah. Wow.
Is that crazy?
Crazy. I was just thinking, I really wish that this work had been around, or I had known about it at that time, because I think it definitely would have made such a big difference to me. I mean, I did read about Jungian psychology and Buddhism, and, I also came across some great books like Jessica did, but to navigate what I went through and have had this work would have been just incredible.
I feel the same way. Yeah, when I was going through that huge rock bottom, I was exactly looking for this work. And I couldn't find it. I was piecing it together with this book or that book or these journal prompts, or, I was in Hay House looking up every single webinar they had. And I wanted something that showed me, okay, here's the emotion I'm sitting with. What do I do with this now? How do I transform this into something that's going to help me heal and help me take the next step at the same time? And I just couldn't find that perfect balance of those two. And then ultimately I wound up finding TBM work, which was so helpful. And I will say too, now if I hit a rock bottom, they're so much less intense because I have tools, because I'm oh, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is the energetic. This is what's going on. There's security in having your coping strategy there for you.
Yeah. And also your trust muscle, it really builds that. So yeah, I love the examples you guys gave. And I think it's hard for me to reflect on where I started in this process of manifestation at 17 to where I am now. And I think people can kind of see where my life is now, and having manifested both on the material plane and the personal plane, most everything I've wanted. And they can look at it and go oh, that's far from where I'm at, or that's privileged, or et cetera. It is privileged. However, I think a really important thing is that I've just put one foot in front of the other for literally how many years now? I mean, almost 20 years in a sense. So I just think that that's a really important thing to highlight. Wherever any of us are at in our practice, it really is continuing to master energetics, to unblock, to expand. Even when you manifest something big. Say you've been doing this work, you manifest something big and you're like, I got this. I'm just going to, like let it go. Keep learning energetics, keep coming back to the practice, because that's what's going to put one foot in front of the other to connect you with everything your soul's been asking for. And I think that's humongous. I think we tend to find work or a program or a practice, not saying this is the one size that fits all, but when it's been successful, continue to master it in the form that works for you, looking at your personal patterning and how can you take it deeper in support with other tools. Yeah, that's something I just want to say, because I think that that's what has led to having the things that I want and continuing to grow.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, often with like a pop star or something, people say, oh, she's an overnight success, but people don't really recognize how many years of hard work have gone into creating what looks like an overnight success. And I think the fact that, we've kind of all talked about the journey that we've been on, but it's kind of ended up with each of us saying that we're in the job that we want, the relationship that we want, and we have, other things that we want in our life, that we are all so passionate about continuing this work. If it was like, do it till you've got everything that you want and then stop, we would have stopped.
Agreed.
One other note I want to make about the magic dark, because I definitely was struggling with this, and I've talked to a few other people when they hit their first magic dark, they're maybe just starting the work and this is the first time they've been in this period. There's a fear that comes up, which especially if you turn down the jobs and you said no to these opportunities of money coming in, because money really holds that security for so many people. There's this feeling of, oh my gosh, I've been following this work to the T. I said no to this job. What if that was my job? What if that was the universe telling me to like take this job and like have financial security? And like, what if I said no to it? And all of those fears start looping. Like, what if this doesn't work? And what if my manifestation is not on the other side? If you feel like you're in that phase in the magic dark, it's so, so important to bring back situations where you have overcome, where you have had financial success, how those things have presented. Remind yourself that you physically are okay in this moment. And what you're fearing is that old loop that has kept you stuck. And so in order to take that next leap, you have to reinforce, okay, well, there's been times where I haven't had jobs before, and this is what happened then. And oh, this job, came through randomly, so it's totally possible to happen. Just start reinforcing all of the times that you've had success in saying no to a job and another job coming through, because then it just reminds you that those fears aren't real.
What did you call that before, Dr. Tara? It's like showing your brain evidence.
Yeah, so there's two parts to that. One is that exactly what Jessica just said, which is that if you have examples in your own past of times that you have achieved things, similar things to what you're trying to achieve now, or just when you thought things wouldn't work out, but they did, then you should, either write them in a journal or keep them at the front of your mind. If you don't have a specific example of the thing that you're trying to manifest at the moment, that's where expanders come in. So another person who's similar to you and in a similar situation to you that has achieved the thing that you want to. It comes back to the whole seeing is believing thing. But I was having another thought while Jessica was speaking, which I think relates back to the trust muscle, which was just one word that really kind of stuck in my mind, which was, is this the universe telling me that I should take this job? When you build up your trust muscle to a certain extent, what that kind of triggered in me was the universe doesn't tell me what to do. The universe gives me opportunities. I tell me what to do. So I think that would help in that situation, because I think there's a level of helplessness in the, should I be doing what the universe is telling me?
Completely agree. And just to build on that a little bit, one thing that you'll notice, the more that you master your process, the more you grow your self-worth, the more unblocked and integrated you become, you tend to actually not experience many magic darks anymore. So they're not always going to happen. And I personally only experience ruts and rock bottoms when a major up-leveling's coming and I'm just not getting the point. So that's one thing too that I want to say, kind of just building on everything we're talking about, noting you will most likely experience a magic dark when you've been in a very low self-worth space for quite some time. So a rut for quite some time that you're afraid to get out of knowingly, consciously. However, the more you manifest and show evidence and have these expanders, and most importantly, integrate, you tend to just experience a couple of tests, and tests, even at that point, they usually move from opportunities, say like a suitor or a job opportunity or whatever, and they move into triggers. So you tend to be triggered in threes or fours by similar dynamics. So that tends to come with the maturity of this practice as well.
One other thing that we have had questions on a lot, because the magic dark is symbolic of our manifestation being so close and wanting us to double down on our trust muscle, is it possible to be unblocking, passing like crazy tests, especially opportunity tests, expanding, hit the magic dark, and let's say as you're moving through the magic dark, can it turn into a rock bottom or a rut before the manifestation comes through?
So I think the ways that would present energetically is if you settled, you're in the magic dark and you're at that final phase and you did take the job for the better money. It's okay to do that. Or say, I remember when I was working with clients, I worked with one in particular and I said, that person is a test for you. But run into the fire. She ran into the fire for 4 years with that person. They've just parted. And she learned a lot and she now knows what she won't accept anymore. So that can take you into a rut. Or again, if you have a manifestation that's very divine, it's very close to you and you settle in that magic dark, that can take you into a rock bottom.
And then can you be in a magic dark period, have a manifestation come through, and then continue in the magic dark? Or would you consider that magic dark, manifestation comes through, and then sort of that lull point in the up level where the manifestation has come through and you're like, okay, now what?
Actually, I wanted to ask a sub-question to that I'd been thinking of, and I think this is the perfect time, which is that if you're calling in several things simultaneously, some things are longer term and some things are shorter term, therefore kind of Jessica's question, which is, if you manifest maybe one of the smaller things along the way, but you're still in the magic dark about the longer term thing, how does that work?
So I'll answer yours first, Tara, and then parlay into yours, Jessica. So that's a really good example of building your trust muscle throughout the process of a big manifestation. So when you manifest those little things along the way, you start to go, oh, holy shit, this works. Oh, wow. Now I know what it feels like when I pass a test. That's my patterning. Oh, my patterning is how tests start to come through. So it's really amazing to keep a journal reference of that and really keeping a journal reference of when you manifest something so you can go back and show your brain that evidence when you can't remember because things are so tough in a magic dark. And when we're manifesting it, not always do things come in all at the same time, especially I like to say our manifestations come in based on how expanded and unblocked we are and where our self-worth is. So you could be manifesting small things while that big thing you've been calling in that's a little bit more out of your expansion that you're having to expand into through expanders. It's a beautiful way to build your trust muscle. And then to answer your question, Jessica, when you do say you're in a magic dark and the manifestation does come through because you held out and you really followed the formatting, and then you go into that lull point. So the way that this can kind of show up is if you manifest the partner and everything's flowing correctly, just as you had hoped, but all of a sudden all of your insecurities and shadows come up. That's not a new magic dark. That's you needing to do shadow work. It's you needing to do inner child. So it's a new form of another mirror coming to you to integrate, because everything that shows up in our life is just a mirror reflecting back of how to get back into our true, holy, authentic, worthy selves. So another version of that could be that you manifest the job finally, and then maybe you're feeling that you're not growing the way you want to. When you start to look at that, again, it's a mirror. It's the exact same thing as a new relationship. It's like, okay, cool, but where in my subconscious do I not truly believe I can grow the way I want to be growing? Or is there an inner child thing going on here? Is there a shadow? It always comes down to those two things at the end of the day. So doing DIs around those and starting to ask for bigger milestones within the job if you're still happy and passionate about the company or the job. So it's not a new magic dark until you start calling something new in, even within the same subject.
Gotcha. So I put together a little checklist just for everyone being like, okay, I know I'm in one of these, but I still don't really know what's this one again. So for the Magic Dark, you're in a Magic Dark if you've expanded, unblocked, and have been passing test. You have cleared space and you've really aligned with your authentic code, but then it feels like the tap has run dry. The water's receded, nothing seems to be coming through, and you're kind of pushed against your edge. So your funds are drying up, you're running out of patience, finding your partner to call in. This could last anywhere from a couple days to even months. There's no time limit on it, but it's going to be your ultimate test of trust. So if you're in the Magic Dark, you want to sit back, trust that the manifestation is coming through, try to get into deservingness. This is where the DI work daily is going to be so important. And then you can continue to unblock and expand and pass tests, but try to surrender as much as possible here.
And I always like to tell people, like, do all the things that you love the most. And it's not in the way of like trying to be in a frequency or positivity. It's in a way of trying to own your deservingness. And some people are like, cool, my savings is running out. I love to go to a spa. It's like, cool, you don't have that cash to do it right now. How can you create that at home? So just really doing the things you love during that time is really commanding that deservingness.
Lots of self-care I think of too. And then for the rut, you're in a rut if you've been in the same endless cycle for 4 months to a year. It feels like you're trekking through mud, uphill, no clarity. You can't seem to catch a flow. You have no motivation. You're unclear of your purpose, feeling like you're meandering. And really what you're needing to do is connect back with your authenticity. So your remedy of getting out of the rut is to do the rut workshop, which really, really walks you through all of the steps of connecting back and helps you clear space in order to listen to your pings again. Any other tips or tools for the rut, would you say, Lacy or Dr. Tara?
Authentic code. And we have that in the workshop, of course, but it's so important to get to your authentic code to understand, there's a lot of things that I need to filter out of my life right now that are being lived through ego or through, it can be either ego or another way that we see the rut is somebody who really doesn't understand their own potential. May it be, again, relationally, career, money, old trauma. So the authentic code is really important for that space and time.
I think that's so true. And then I was just getting this kind of ping of, if you get a ping that I've been here before, I've had this feeling before, you need to take it really seriously and not just stay in the rut for longer than you have to.
I love that. Love it, love it, love it. Because that's your personal patterning again, to start learning it.
Yeah.
And then rock bottom, you're in a rock bottom. I mean, I feel like a lot of people know immediately when they're in the rock bottom.
It's like hard to miss that one. It's so painful.
Yeah, but you're calling in something big that feels far from your self-worth. You feel earthquaked, like the rug's pulled out from underneath you. All of your worth and security feels like it's been taken from you. You're not sure how you're going to get back on your feet again. And the real reason for this is your self-worth is so far away from what you're calling in, and the universe wants you to grow quickly to align with it. And what better way is to rip out the rug and be like, you're not getting the point. I'm going to have you strip everything back, all of your constructs, and reevaluate to realign with what you're calling in. And the Rock Bottom Workshop is incredible for that. It really takes you and holds your hand step by step to build up your self-worth and help you align with that manifestation.
And I feel like that workshop is one of our most energetically comprehensive. Like, if you follow, it will work out.
Absolutely.
I also think it's important because even when, you say, Jessica, that it's really obvious when it's a rock bottom and, like you said, Lacy, it's painful. It's almost like we prefer pain to change. We're very, very change resistant. So a classic example could be that you found out that your partner had an affair, but you kind of still stay in the relationship. So like, the point that Lacy's got to, which I think is very difficult to get to, but that we all will eventually, is that when a rock bottom happens, to understand that you really need to embrace it because this is leading to something better than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, and it's really hard. It's really hard when we're going through these, but the silver lining does have to be something much better is going to fill this space one day, not too far from now.
And I just want to leave you guys off with a manifestation story. So we have the motivation on the website, which is all of our testimonials. It's our community that's really helping be expanders for all of you. So if you haven't already, definitely go check it out. We'll have the link in the show note to help expand you, especially when you're moving through these various periods, just to shed light on the other side of it. But this one story really highlighted an excellent way of navigating the magic dark. So this person was calling in an expanded business, consistent client booking, confidence in their self, and their dream car. So they hit a magic dark period. They had no clients for 3 months, and they were running out of money to pay their bills and even the apps to help run their business. They had very few dollars left in their bank account, and their Audible still needed to go through, which would cause them to overdraft. And so they could either ask their partner to put in money so they wouldn't overdraft, which felt like a no, or they could dog paddle and cancel their Audible, which also felt like a no. So what actually felt like the hell yes was allowing it to overdraft and surrendering to the universe. So they let it overdraft, and then a few days later they noticed that Audible had never charged them, and they received the credit back. And then very shortly after that, they started booking a ton of clients, and their business has up-leveled wildly since then. And now they're doing what they love, and it's lighting them up. The business continues to expand and grow, and their partner surprised them with their dream car, which is their kind of understanding of their final ability to receive in high self-worth and not be dog paddling. So I think that's just such a good example of when you're in that magic dark and you're pushed against your financial limits. It's not saying let all of your accounts overdraft. That was what this person needed and felt the most magnetic for them in the moment. Listen to your intuition, listen to your pings, and what feels, if I was in my high self-worth, what decisions would I make from this place, and move forward with that.
I love these, Jessica. I feel like we should have a series where we break down the energetics of, because I have so much I can like teach on and comment on just based on that small blurb. But again, I can already see like a really mean review coming through being like, they're telling people to let their accounts overdraft. And again, I just really want to hit that on the head. The energetic teaching in that, the opposite is always the magnetism. It's kind of like Ayurveda. I say this all the time that, you know, when you're trying to balance out doshas, it's usually the opposite you need for medicine. It's the exact same thing in manifestation energetics. So this particular person, the other options that felt like no's were probably the comfortable things they've done in the past. And for them, the true jumping off the cliff to really show the universe in this moment, I'm telling you right here and now, I'm not going to settle in the ways that I have in the past. I'm just going to brave it, and I'm going to let my account overdraft. It's scary, that $30 extra on top of the money I don't have. I'm just going to face this because it's the opposite of what I would do in the past. And this is also communicating to you that I'm not messing around. And look how it all worked out. And so again, we're not telling people to let your accounts overdraft and go into debt at all. Actually, I think a lot of manifestation rhetoric out there will teach you that. That's not at all what we're saying. It's the opposite is always the medicine. So I love that. And I'm so glad we're encouraging people more and more to go and read through those in the motivation based on what you're calling in, because it's the free, easy way to find expanders, and also to look at somebody else's process to go, oh, I can see the teaching, the energetic that happened here that worked for them. How is that applicable in my life personally for me that's different? So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Course. And yeah, so for anyone out there, if you feel like you resonate with one of these 3 periods in manifestation, go to the corresponding workshops. We'll have them linked below. And if you're not in any of those periods right now, I would take inventory, if you haven't already, of times that you have been in these. So if you ever face one in the future, now you have an understanding of your patterning and how it comes up for you and how it works for you. It's always good to have something to refer back to when you can think of, oh yeah, I was in that during this period and this is how I navigated. All right. Well, thank you both so much for your knowledge and wisdom and time. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica and Dr. Tara. Dr. Tara was more energetic, but you had some of the best examples.
Oh, I'm so privileged that my example actually got your energetic input into it. It's really got me thinking.
And a really sweet thing that everybody should know to take us into spring and then into summer is that Dr. Tara has some ducklings coming in her yard.
Yay!
Yay!
That's so special.
I know, but well, I think it's extra special to me because you've got your own little duckling coming. So I feel like we're connected in that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.